When you hear Russian Tsar, you probably picture gold, thrones, a stern glare, and maybe half a liter of vodka. But hold on, this video isn't about the royal portrait. It's about the chaotic, surreal circus happening behind it. You're about to learn why generals were clucking like chickens, rats were put on trial, and pears literally exploded. Because when one guy gets to do whatever he wants, history turns into a comedy of madness. 1. Let's kick things off with Peter III, a man who took his toys so seriously it crossed over into full-blown psychosis. When a common rat had the audacity to chew on one of his beloved tin soldiers, Peter didn't just get mad. He went full-on Judge Dredd. He convened a formal military court-martial, because apparently property damage in his bedroom was a capital offense. I want to know everything about this trial. Did the rat get a lawyer? Was it one of his other toys? A stuffed bear who just wasn't prepared for a case of this magnitude? Did they have to get a tiny little rat Bible for him to swear on? The verdict, of course, was guilty. A miniature gallows was built with grim precision, and the rat was publicly hanged as a warning to all other rodents. This wasn't just a kid playing, this was a future emperor running a dress rehearsal for his reign, proving that even the smallest creature could face the full, terrifying, and utterly insane force of his law. 2. Catherine the Great was a powerhouse. She was a brilliant strategist, a cunning politician, and the ruler of a vast empire. But at the end of the day, she was also just a lady who needed her feet tickled to fall asleep. And because she was Catherine the Great, she didn't just ask her husband, she hired a professional. A man's entire career, his sole purpose in the Grand Russian court was to be the imperial foot tickler. Can you imagine the pressure of that job interview? So, Dmitry, tell me about your tickling philosophy. Are you more of a gentle feather grazer or a firm knuckle roller? This guy's entire livelihood depended on his ability to produce the perfect, slumber-inducing tickle every single night. One wrong move, one accidental sneeze, or an overly aggressive pinky toe prod, and you could go from royal bedchamber to Siberian salt mine. It is the most absurdly specific and luxurious job title in human history. 3. If you were a nobleman at Empress Anna's court, you basically had to be prepared for anything, including being turned into livestock for her amusement. She had a sense of humor that was less ha-ha funny and more oh God please make it stop funny. When boredom struck, she would look at all the powerful decorated men in her throne room, dukes, princes, generals, and decide the vibe was off. Her solution? Make them act like chickens. She would command these grown men, these pillars of the empire, to get inside giant wicker baskets and start clucking. You just know there was a frantic, silent panic as everyone tried to remember what a chicken sounds like. You'd have some war hero, a guy who stormed fortresses, sweating bullets while trying to produce a convincing bok bok bok. It was the ultimate alpha move, a twisted, humiliating reminder that no matter how fancy your title was, you were just one bad cluck away from unemployment. 4. Peter the Great is famous for modernizing Russia, but what they don't tell you is that he also had the sense of humor of a 14-year-old who just discovered prank videos. His absolute favorite gag was his exploding pear. He had a fake pear made, looking all juicy and delicious, but it was hollowed out and packed with gunpowder. He'd set this culinary IED in a fruit bowl at a state dinner, and just wait. He was essentially fishing for idiots. Some poor, unsuspecting foreign diplomat or a new courtier trying to impress everyone would reach for it, and kaboom, a face full of black soot, a fancy wig blown askew, and total chaos. And Peter? He'd be in the corner, a 6'7" giant absolutely losing his mind, slapping his knee and crying with laughter. His court must have had a collective phobia of fruit. It was a clear message. In Peter's Russia, even the snacks could kill you. 5. Empress Anna apparently looked at a normal parrot and thought, "This is boring. It needs to be more offensive." So, in a desperate bid to win her favor, her courtiers undertook a special project. They taught her beloved pet to swear. And we're not talking about a few light curses. They trained this bird to be a feathered, filth-flinging machine, armed with a vocabulary that would make a drill sergeant blush. This parrot became her secret weapon of social chaos. Imagine a stuffy ambassador trying to deliver a formal address, only to be relentlessly heckled by a bird in the corner questioning his life choices with shocking vulgarity. Anna found this absolutely hysterical. The parrot was basically her id, a green-feathered troll that said all the terrible things she was thinking about her guests, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. 6. Peter III was utterly convinced he was a violin god, a true prodigy sent from the heavens to bless the world with his music. The only problem was, he played the violin with the skill and grace of a man trying to saw a live badger in half with a rusty spoon. It was an auditory crime scene, but he was the emperor, so nobody could just tell him, "Dude, you suck." Instead, he forced everyone at court to attend his concerts. These weren't musical events, they were hostage situations. His wife, Catherine the Great, a certified genius, had to sit there for hours, smiling politely while her ears bled. You can practically see her, plotting the coup in her head with each screeching note. That's it. Another off-key E string and I'm calling my generals. His terrible music wasn't just a funny quirk. It was probably a major contributing factor to his overthrow. 7. Empress Elizabeth didn't just like clothes. She was in a deeply committed, possibly unhealthy relationship with her wardrobe. The woman reportedly never wore the same fancy gown twice. When she died, they did an inventory and found over 15,000 dresses. That is not a closet. That's a fabric-based ecosystem. It's the kind of collection that would make a Kardashian look like a minimalist. Entire wings of the Winter Palace were basically just giant, climate-controlled storage units for her outfits. Think of the poor servants whose job it was to organize this textile avalanche. Where's the blue silk from that party in 1748? Check aisle 47, section B, next to the taffeta from last Tuesday. She wasn't just a monarch. She was the CEO of the world's most extravagant and least practical clothing rental service, where she was the only customer. 8. Peter the Great had a lot of hobbies: shipbuilding, modernizing the army, and, most terrifyingly, amateur dentistry. He owned a bag of gruesome-looking dental tools and viewed the mouths of his courtiers as his personal practice ground. This was like if your boss suddenly got a learn surgery at home kit and decided to try it out on you during your performance review. Peter would just be walking through the palace, spot a nobleman, and decide, you know what? That molar looks suspicious. There was no anesthetic, no hygiene, and definitely no option to say no. You just had to sit there and let the 6'7" emperor of all Russia go to town on your jaw with a pair of pliers. It's the ultimate power trip, being able to inflict unsolicited dental work on your employees just because you feel like it. 9. Empress Anna had a very creative approach to human resources, especially for employees who failed their performance reviews. When one prince, Mikhail Golitsyn, royally ticked her off, she didn't just fire him or send him to a desolate corner of Siberia. No, that was too boring. She decided to produce, direct, and star in the single cruelest episode of a reality dating show in history. First, she annulled his previous marriage and forced him to marry a woman from her court she personally selected for being, in her opinion, exceptionally old and unattractive. That was just the appetizer. For the main course, she commissioned a massive, elaborate palace to be constructed entirely out of solid blocks of ice, right in the middle of a brutal St. Petersburg winter. On their wedding night, the happy couple was stripped down to their undergarments, paraded through the streets, and then locked inside this frozen hellscape. The bed was ice, the chairs were ice, even the decorative ice flowers were probably sharpened to a point. It was a level of petty theatrical revenge that most people can only dream of. It's like your worst ex getting unlimited power and a construction budget to build a monument to how much they hate you. 10. Not content with just turning her nobles into a human petting zoo, Empress Anna also curated what can only be described as a personal collection of human oddities for her own amusement. She maintained a massive court of jesters, dwarves, and people with various physical disabilities, but this wasn't an early stab at inclusive hiring. She treated them like her own personal, live-action sitcom cast, and the show was always a dark comedy. Her favorite pastime was staging elaborate, cruel, and deeply humiliating pranks. She would force them into bizarre contests, make them fight each other, or put them in ridiculous situations just to see what would happen, all while she laughed hysterically. It's as if she watched Jackass and thought, "This is great, but it needs more serfdom and despair." She wasn't just a ruler. She was the twisted talent scout and executive producer of the world's most depressing and mandatory circus. 11. Peter the Great was a man of immense energy, and sometimes that energy was channeled into activities that were, to put it mildly, deeply questionable. He was apparently a big fan of bowling, a classic pastime. However, he found the standard 10 wooden pins to be tragically uninspired and lacking in human suffering. So he invented his own version, human bowling. According to some historical accounts, during his famously wild and drunken parties, he would order the dwarves of his court to stand in a triangular formation at the end of a long hall. Then, the 6'7" emperor would grab a large wooden bowling ball, wind up like a pro bowler, and let it fly, trying to score a strike on living people. You can just picture the scene: the frantic scramble, the sound of a heavy wooden ball hitting a human shin. It's a level of cartoonish villainy that even a Disney movie would find too over the top. He probably had a special pair of bowling shoes and a custom monogrammed ball just for the occasion. 12. Peter the Great's hobbies weren't all fun, games, and terrorizing his staff. Some were just plain disgusting and designed to test the stomach lining of his court. He founded Russia's first museum, the Kunstkamera, which was less of a cultural institution and more of a Ripley's Believe It or Not exhibit curated by a mad scientist. It was filled with jars containing every anatomical oddity imaginable: deformed animal skeletons, conjoined twins, and famously, a huge collection of malformed human babies preserved in cloudy alcohol. But looking wasn't enough for Peter. During tours, to really share the experience, he would occasionally pour a shot of the preservation fluid, the very liquid the pickled fetus was floating in, and force his guests to drink it. Imagine the sheer horror. You're trying to look sophisticated, and the emperor hands you a glass of what is essentially human and booze soup, and gives you that no-pressure look. It was the ultimate loyalty test, and the world's worst party dare rolled into one nauseating package. 13. Empress Anna was basically the 18th century founder of the celebrity gossip industry, but with way more state-sponsored terror. The woman was utterly obsessed with knowing everyone's dirty laundry, and she weaponized this obsession. She established a secret police force called the Chancellery of Secret Investigative Affairs, which sounds incredibly official but was, in reality, her personal gossip squad. Their main job wasn't foiling plots against the state. It was finding out which count was cheating on his wife, which duke was secretly broke, and which lady-in-waiting made a face when the empress unveiled her new dress. Anna then took this treasure trove of personal information and used it for pure, unadulterated blackmail, keeping everyone at court terrified and completely under her thumb. She wasn't just a ruler, she was the editor-in-chief of a national tabloid where every story was true, and a bad review could get you sent to Siberia. 14. Empress Elizabeth was a world-class party animal who decided that the natural rotation of the earth was personally inconveniencing her. So, she did what any self-respecting absolute monarch would do. She made the entire country's elite switch to her nocturnal schedule. She completely inverted the court's routine, effectively forcing hundreds of nobles to become vampires. Official business, state dinners, and lavish balls would kick off around midnight and rage on until the sun came up. Then, while the rest of Russia was out tending to their crops, the entire imperial court would go to sleep, leaving the Winter Palace a silent gilded tomb during daylight hours. This is next-level power. It's not just telling people what to do, it's rewriting the fundamental concept of day and night because you prefer to party after dark. It's like she decided morning was cancelled because it clashed with her outfits. 15. Peter the Great's relationship with the Russian Orthodox Church was, let's say, complicated. On one hand, he was its official head. On the other hand, he created a full-blown parody version called the all-joking, all-drunken Synod of Fools and Jesters. This wasn't just a casual drinking club. It was an elaborately organized, deeply blasphemous fraternity for him and his rowdiest friends. They had a mock pope, who was given a ridiculous title and forced to wear absurd costumes, and their sacred rituals were just drinking games. Their sermons were drinking contests, their hymns were vulgar songs, and their holiest sacrament was vodka. The entire point was to get absolutely, spectacularly wasted while systematically mocking every aspect of church ceremony. This was a state-sponsored frat party disguised as a religious order, run by the one man who couldn't possibly get in trouble for it. 16. Peter the Great was obsessed with dragging Russia into the modern era, and his greatest enemy in this quest was the traditional Russian beard. He saw facial hair as a symbol of everything old, backwards, and un-European, so he declared a holy war on it. He didn't just encourage shaving, he instituted a nationwide beard tax. You either had to shave your face baby smooth or pay the government a fee for the privilege of keeping your whiskers. If you paid up, you were issued a special metal token like a license to beard, which you had to carry at all times. Imagine special beard police roaming the streets, ready to forcibly shave any man who couldn't produce his papers. It was government overreach at its most absurdly personal level, as if the DMV suddenly decided to regulate mustaches. In Peter's Russia, your face wasn't your own. It was government property pending a style review. 17. Peter the Great was a hands-on teacher, especially when it came to dancing. He imported Western-style balls and assemblies to Russia, but quickly realized his nobles moved with the grace of bears on ice skates. His solution wasn't patient instruction, it was violence. He would patrol the dance floor during these grand events with a large stick or cane in hand. If he spotted a guest fumbling a step or looking clumsy, he would walk right up and whack them on the legs, ankles, or shins. It was percussive dance instruction. Imagine trying to learn the minuet while the 6'7", notoriously short-tempered emperor is circling you like a shark, just waiting for you to miss a beat so he can deliver a swift, painful correction. It's the most terrifying dance class imaginable, where the fear of public humiliation was matched only by the fear of actual physical assault from the host. 18. Most rulers tax things like land, property, or goods. Peter the Great looked at that system and thought, too complicated, let's just tax their existence. He introduced the soul tax, a revolutionary and incredibly harsh poll tax levied on every single male peasant, from babies to old men. It didn't matter if you owned land, had a good harvest, or were dirt poor. If you had a soul and were male, you owed the government money. This was a stroke of evil genius. You can't hide your soul from the tax man. You can't pretend you have fewer souls than you actually do. It fundamentally changed the tax burden, making it crushingly heavy for the poorest peasants and making every newborn son a new tax liability for his family. It was a brutally efficient system for extracting money from people who had nothing left to give but their very being. 19. Every kid plays with toy soldiers, but for a young Peter the Great, playtime looked suspiciously like a real military boot camp. He wasn't content with just lining up little figures on his floor. He recruited his childhood friends and the sons of local nobles into his poteshny voiska, which translates to the toy army, except these weren't toys. He had them outfitted in real, custom-made military uniforms, gave them scaled-down but very real weapons, and put them through grueling drills and full-scale mock battles. These weren't harmless games of make-believe. They were dangerous war games where actual injuries were common. It was like if your kid's Boy Scout troop was suddenly armed with live ammunition and started practicing siege warfare in the backyard. This terrifying childhood hobby eventually evolved into the elite guard regiments of the Russian Imperial Army, proving that Peter's idea of fun was always deadly serious. 20. Emperor Paul I was a man consumed by paranoia and a deep hatred for anything related to the French Revolution. His fear was so intense that it extended to dancing. He became convinced that the waltz, with its close holds and swirling motions, was a dangerously decadent and revolutionary dance that would inevitably lead to chaos and the collapse of his empire. So he did what any rational, level-headed ruler would do. He banned it completely. He issued an official decree making it illegal to waltz in Russia. Imagine being a young noble trying to have a good time at a ball. and a guard storms in to shut it down because your dance moves are considered a threat to national security. It's a level of micromanagement that's both hilarious and terrifying, where the government is not only in your business but also policing your personal dance space. 21. Empress Anna Ioannovna was an avid hunter, but she also really hated going outside. She saw this not as a conflict, but as an engineering problem to be solved. She had her palaces custom built with special, large windows that could be opened wide. This allowed her to sit comfortably in a lavishly decorated room, sipping her tea, while she took potshots at any bird, stray dog, or other unfortunate animal that wandered into her line of sight. It was like a live-action version of the video game Duck Hunt, but played from a throne with a high-powered rifle. She had servants whose entire job was to drive animals towards her windows, so she wouldn't have to wait too long for a target. It was the ultimate lazy person's blood sport, combining a love for hunting with a deep, profound commitment to never having to put on boots. 22. Catherine the Great, the woman who took on the Ottoman Empire and expanded Russia's borders, had a secret weakness that was less than a few inches tall. She was pathologically terrified of mice. A single mouse sighting could reportedly send the all-powerful Empress into a full-blown panic. To combat this microscopic threat, she turned the Winter Palace into a fortress of felines. She maintained a massive, officially recognized army of cats who were given free reign of the palace. They were fed, cared for, and treated as furry, four-legged security guards. These weren't just pets. They were the elite special forces in her personal war on rodents. It's a hilarious image, one of the most powerful women in the world, capable of commanding armies and navies, being completely undone by the sight of a tiny mouse scurrying across the floor. 23. The last Tsar, Nicholas II, was living through one of the most turbulent periods in Russian history. But his personal hobby was surprisingly wholesome and relatable. He was an avid amateur photographer, a sort of proto-Instagrammer of the imperial court. And his favorite subject, his ultimate muse, was his cat Kotka. While his empire was teetering on the brink of collapse, Nicholas was busy staging elaborate photo shoots with his beloved feline. There are numerous photos of Kotka lounging on pillows, being held by the imperial children, and generally living its best life. It's a strangely humanizing and absurd detail. The man who was about to lose everything was, in his spare time, basically just another cat dad trying to get the perfect shot of his fluffy companion for the family album. 24. On the eve of the disastrous Russo-Japanese War, a conflict that would humiliate Russia and set the stage for revolution, Tsar Nicholas II wasn't just consulting his generals and ministers. He and the Empress were getting their strategic advice from a French spiritualist and mystic named Monsieur Philippe. This guy was a quack who claimed he could talk to the dead and predict the future. While trained military advisors were presenting logical plans and warnings, Nicholas was putting his faith in a dude who was basically a 19th century TV psychic. He ignored his government and listened to the mystic, who assured him of a glorious Russian victory. It's like a president deciding to launch a war based on a chat with their astrologer. It was a catastrophic decision rooted in superstition, proving that when it came to running a country, Nicholas preferred magic over military intelligence. 25. The day the Russian Revolution truly began, the day his entire world started to crumble and burn, the last Tsar, Nicholas II, made an entry in his diary. This should be a document of immense historical weight, filled with angst, fear, and a sense of impending doom. Instead, it reads like the diary of a deeply boring man on a very uneventful vacation. His full entry for that fateful day reads, "Walked for a long time, killed a crow, drank tea." That's it. The capital is in flames, mutiny is spreading through the army, his dynasty is collapsing after 300 years, and the Tsar's big takeaway from the day is that he successfully managed some light cardio, engaged in some questionable bird-related activities, and enjoyed a hot beverage. It is the single most out-of-touch, blissfully unaware historical record in existence. It's like a pilot writing, "The weather is nice," in his logbook as both engines are on fire and the plane is in a nosedive. 26. Russia's time of troubles was so chaotic that it produced not one, but a series of men who claimed to be the dead son of Ivan the Terrible, like a terrible boy band that kept replacing its members. These guys are known as the false Dmitrys. The first one was so convincing, or perhaps everyone was just so desperate, that he actually succeeded. He marched on Moscow, was accepted by the people, and ruled as the actual Tsar for almost a year. Can you imagine the sheer audacity? It's like a random guy showing up in Washington, D.C., claiming to be a secret long-lost son of Abraham Lincoln, and everyone just going, "Yeah, that seems legit," and handing him the keys to the White House. This wasn't just a simple scam. It was the most successful case of fake it till you make it in political history, and it happened multiple times. 27. Peter III was the emperor of all Russia, but he was essentially a German fanboy who got the world's most extreme promotion. Born in Germany, he had a burning, obsessive man-crush on the Prussian king, Frederick the Great. He adored everything Prussian, the language, the uniforms, the military drills. As a result, he barely spoke Russian and made little effort to learn, preferring to speak German at his own court. He was the ruler of Russia, yet he treated the country like it was some backwater province he was unfortunately stuck with. It's like hiring a CEO for Ford who shows up to work wearing a Honda jacket, drives a Toyota, and spends all his time talking about how much better Japanese cars are. His own wife, Catherine the Great, used his blatant pro-Prussian stance as one of the main justifications for overthrowing him, proving that being a cringy, obsessive fanboy is not a good look for an absolute monarch. 28. In the 17th century, under Tsar Alexei I, Russia apparently decided that happiness itself was a crime. During his reign, a series of deeply puritanical laws were passed to crack down on public fun. These weren't just suggestions, they were actual laws that could get you punished for things like telling a joke in public, playing a musical instrument, or even laughing too loudly. It was as if the entire country was put under the rule of a grumpy librarian. You can just picture the fun police roaming the streets, handing out tickets for excessive smiling, or breaking up illegal, underground comedy clubs. It was a government-mandated war on joy, an official policy that basically said, life is hard and miserable and you are legally required to act like it. It's a bizarre chapter in history where the state tried to legislate away laughter itself. 29. Fyodor I, the son of Ivan the Terrible, was different. After his famously brutal father, Russia got a ruler who was profoundly gentle, deeply religious, and whose greatest passion in life was ringing church bells. He was known as Fyodor the Bell Ringer. This wasn't just a casual hobby. He would travel the country on grand tours, not for political reasons, but specifically to visit different churches and ring their bells himself. While his advisors were trying to run the country, the Tsar was busy perfecting his bell-ringing technique. He was so simple-minded and obsessed with his hobby that the actual business of ruling was handled almost entirely by his brother-in-law, Boris Godunov. It's like the kingdom was handed over to a guy whose only marketable skill was making loud noises at scheduled times. 30. Ivan the Terrible's love life was less of a romantic journey and more of a chaotic season of a reality TV show where most of the contestants don't survive. The man went through at least 7 wives, a number that would be impressive for a modern rock star, let alone a 16th century monarch. His marital track record was a disaster. One wife was packed off to a convent, another was allegedly poisoned, a third died under mysterious circumstances. The list goes on. By the end of his life, he had such a horrifying reputation that he literally couldn't find anyone noble enough and brave enough to marry him. The Orthodox Church had rules against having more than 3 wives, but Ivan just ignored them, basically telling the church, "I'm the Tsar, I'll have as many weddings as I want." He was the Henry VIII of Russia, but with more poison and fewer catchy songs. 31. Ivan the Terrible had a very direct and painful way of teaching people about courtroom etiquette. When a French ambassador appeared before him and, following the custom of his own country, refused to remove his hat, Ivan didn't just get angry. He decided to make a very sharp point. He calmly ordered his guards to seize the diplomat. Then, he instructed them to nail the man's hat directly to his head. It's a level of diplomatic incident that you just don't see anymore. This wasn't just an insult. It was a hands-on, hardware-based lesson in showing respect. You can be sure that from that day forward, every single foreign diplomat who entered Ivan's court triple-checked to make sure their head was completely bare. It's a brutal, effective, and utterly insane way to say, "Welcome to Russia, now take your hat off." 32. The legend surrounding the construction of St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow is a perfect example of Ivan the Terrible's unique brand of employee appreciation. The story goes that when the cathedral was finally completed, Ivan was so completely overwhelmed by its stunning, unique beauty that he summoned the architects, a duo named Barma and Postnik. He wanted to ensure that this masterpiece would never be equaled, that its glory would remain singular in all the world. A normal boss might give them a huge bonus or a plaque. Ivan, however, chose a more permanent solution. He had them both blinded. His logic was brutally simple. If they can't see, they can never again build something so beautiful to rival his cathedral. It's the most horrifying thank you in architectural history, a permanent solution to prevent any future competition. 33. And finally, we come to the act that forever defined Ivan the Terrible. During a heated argument, reportedly over something as trivial as his daughter-in-law's dress, Ivan's infamous rage exploded. He raised his heavy, pointed royal staff and struck his own son and heir, Ivan Ivanovich, in the head. The single blow proved fatal. Instantly, the Tsar's fury turned to horrified grief as he cradled his dying son, but it was too late. In a blind fit of temper, he had not only killed his child but also murdered the future of his own dynasty, cementing his legacy as a true monster. So there you have it. Tsars who punished beards, declared war on fruit, and used laws like stand-up material. If absolute power is a drug, some of these guys were definitely overdosing. Now here's your royal dilemma. You've been betrayed. Do you A, quietly fire your advisor, or B, force him to marry the ugliest person at court and spend the wedding night in a frozen palace? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you love history that sounds like a fever dream, hit like and subscribe.